Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Hail to Michigan podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Harder, and today I am joined by my two gracious co hosts, Contown and Matt. Contown, how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to this really important game Saturday. Looking forward to breaking it down with you guys. So
Yeah, it's a maze out. It's going to be a packed stadium, probably the biggest recruiting weekend in Michigan history. Ton of different recruits coming in, 5 stars, 4 stars, 2022 kids, 2023 kids, all the way to 2025, I think, which is insane to think about that Michigan's recruiting 2025 kids. But
There's a 2027 kid, Walter Nolan's brother.
oh yeah, Walter's younger
is
brother.
that Waylon Nolan? Is his name Waylon?
I think
One,
it's Waylon.
one of them is Waylon. I don't know if that's the 2027 or there's two coming, and it's
Because
like
there's two coming.
2025 and
That's right.
2027. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's going to be
shout out,
exciting.
shout out Waylon Nolan.
Yes, exactly. Matt, how are you?
Doing good. Looking forward to the weekend. Hopefully, all blue uniforms. I'm counting on that. And
All blue. Interesting.
oh yeah, all blue with the maze out behind. It'd be perfect.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Let's get right into it and talk about some of the matchups that we're going to see. Contown, let's start with you. What's a matchup that you're looking for on Michigan's offense against that Washington defense?
Well, I mean, I think the offense is obviously going to get a steeper challenge, a stiffer challenge this week from Washington. Despite the results of the Montana game, it really wasn't the defense that let Washington down. They got some short fields to work with, and they were on the field a lot. And I don't know if you told any Washington fan that Montana would only score 13, they would have probably bet their house that Washington would have won that game. So I think Washington's defense is going to be fine and comparable to what we thought it would be coming into the year. Any Jimmy Lake defense is going to have great defensive back play. He's a D-back guy. They put a lot of D-backs in the league. They've got talent in the defensive backfield, especially with their corner McDuffie. So I kind of think the big matchup for Michigan's offense against Washington's defense is going to be Michigan's wide receiver room that is now, unfortunately, without Ronnie Bell, going up against what should be a very well-coached secondary for Washington that is going to be featuring at least one high-round NFL draft pick in McDuffie. And then this offseason, they also added the nickelback from Oklahoma. I'm going to try to get the name right. Bookie Radley Hiles.
There you go.
Is that right? Yeah. I love the hyphenated names. I always
Yeah.
got to get the order down, but I always love to see a hyphenated name on a jersey. He's like a scrappy player, super physical nickel, maybe a little prone to a penalty here and there, but super physical and competitive guy. I think it's going to be, Michigan obviously wants to be a run first team, but Washington's got some big boys up front, so they're gonna have to be balanced in this game, and especially get into a little bit more of the play action game that hopefully they've set up a little bit with what they put on film in week one. But it'll be a good test for Cade and for this wide receiver room against a well coached secondary that has some legitimate NFL talent in it.
Matt, you just heard Contown talk about the DBs of Washington going up against Michigan's wide receivers and Cade. They looked really good last week. What are you looking for in terms of the run game against the Washington D line that has some really big bodies and some pretty athletic linebackers?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big game for the rushing attack. Contown mentioned a few of the DBs. I think that's really the strength of their unit. And I've always kind of leaned to, individual matchups are one thing, but kind of leaned towards, you could be a pass first team against a light front like we had last week. But rather than play to your strengths necessarily, maybe play to their weakness. I think their weakness is going to be, it's relative, for their defense in general, with their defense being so strong. But the front six, they kind of play a true nickel style. I think it's going to be important to create gaps. It's really going to be a schematic thing more than any one-on-one matchup. They lost their big edge rusher, which that would be the one to look at, if had he been healthy. But they lost their edge rusher on the offseason. They're really big up front. We got to scheme some things up. And I really don't see for Michigan's offense, I don't see real favorable matchup. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and they're just going to have to be efficient more so than expose some big weakness on Washington's defense, because I'm not sure there is one.
Yeah, those are some really good points that you bring up. As Content alluded to earlier, that Washington defense wasn't the problem last week against Montana. It was their offense. The running game looked really bad. I think they got held to like 30 yards on the ground. Dylan Morris looked really, really bad on the passing game. He had a really good first drive. I think they scored a quick touchdown, but then after that, it just went downhill from there. And obviously they got upset versus Montana, who's they're an FCS school, right? They're not Division II quite yet.
They're FCS. They're a decent FCS program, but they had
Washington should have beat them.
They had 232 yards and 13 points and won the game.
Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, it just –
and I think there's like the easy comparison to make is when Michigan lost to App State, but we kind of caught Appalachian State at like the peak of their FCS run. They were like off back to back to back. They may have been a three-peat champion. It seems like Montana kind of peaked like maybe 5 years ago in FCS. Then maybe even longer ago than that, North Dakota State was on top for a while. And then last year's national championship was Sam Houston State versus South Dakota State. So yeah, Montana's a good FCS program, but they're not but they're not North Dakota State. They're not Sam Houston State.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Not to go down that App State rabbit hole, as it brings back terrible memories for everybody that's involved with Michigan football. But
it's interesting with like when you lose a game like that. Everyone expected Michigan to come back against Oregon.
They got blown out.
And they got blown out at home against Oregon the next game. So
that was the start of Oregon's peak.
Yeah. Do we throw out the result for Washington last week and say, hey, they can't be that bad again. They're going to come back, swinging, or are they going to completely quit on the year? I mean, it usually goes one of two ways. It's usually not in the middle.
I want to say yes. But man, I remember preseason when we were talking about Washington and doing our season predictions, we talked about Joe Donovan, the offensive coordinator, and just how bad he is. I mean, you saw what he didn't do at Penn State with that offense with so much talent on it. Then he went to Jacksonville and, was an offensive assistant. And then when he got hired at Washington, when Jimmy Lake took over the program, I remember saying, like, that's a terrible hire because he's not good whatsoever. He's so vanilla on offense, and there's no creativity with his offense whatsoever.
I believe he was at Vanderbilt in between there, too.
He was. That's why he came with James Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was after Penn State. That would make sense.
He went from Vanderbilt to Penn State, and then he was Jaguars, running backs assistant or something.
That makes
something
sense.
Weird, yeah. Where he wasn't calling plays. That's where he was in Jacksonville.
Right. It was. I was pretty skeptical when. I mean, Washington's like a top 20 talent team. They're a good program for sure.
Absolutely.
But I was pretty skeptical when you started seeing outlets like Phil Steele had them like 6th or something, like top 10 team going into the season. And I guess I didn't really know what that was based off of. Like they returned a good amount of production, I think. And they went 3-1 last year, but I was not buying into the 3-1 season that they had last year.
I wasn't either. There were a lot of things that I saw in Dylan Morris's game that I wasn't a fan of.
Yeah, I thought Dylan Morris is, I think he's at best like an average quarterback. The Pac-12 was so weird last year. Like I tend to throw out most 2020 results, but especially Pac-12 results. And then the last time we really saw them in 2019, they were a pretty mediocre football team.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just, I guess it was really a true guess as to how they would come out this year with Jimmy Lake. This is his first real year as head coach. And then John Donovan running the offense, or Joe Donovan running the offense for the first time since he was in charge of Penn State.
It's John. It's John
Donovan.
Is it John?
Donovan.
So Joe Donovan's the former catcher for Michigan then.
Yes.
That's how I kept getting those two mixed up, and I was like, okay, is it Joe or John? Because
I just looked it up because when you said Joe, I was like,
you don't know.
John.
And Penn State went from him to Joe Moorhead,
and won the conference immediately. They got rid of him and won the conference. They didn't have like 2 or 3 recruiting classes in between.
Nope. So it's not like they were lacking of talent.
2022, take the over on Washington's win total.
Yeah, if they get rid of Donovan. They would think he would be.
The Cover 3 podcast, which is a decent national look for college football, I think, and they have kind of a running theory on like defensive guys that become head coaches, defensive coordinators become head coaches. Like that offensive coordinator hire is so imperative, and if like Jeremy Pruitt is the guy they always compare Lake to, but like if you get the head coaching job and you hire a dud of an OC, we can already kind of tell how it's going to go. Just you're going to manage the game like you're still the defensive coordinator and not the head coach. Like that was the biggest question mark with Jimmy Lake coming in, and it's still way up in the air. I mean,
yeah, these are not the Washington teams of Chris Peterson.
No,
that's for sure. If this were a Chris Peterson coach team, this preview would be a lot different from what it is right now, because that would be a team that scares me.
Just overall as a program, like not just the offense. Like
absolutely.
It was just Chris Peterson, like you knew exactly what you were going to get. And Jimmy Lake, there's just still so much unknown with this program. It's interesting. It was a horrifying game before the year, and now it's like after that type of game, I don't know what to think.
I do think, they're going to have, I think, kind of like a dying breath kind of thing, like a wounded animal. I think Michigan's going to have to really, really deal with them for a quarter or even the whole first half. But I think if Michigan can, for certain, shut them down for a half, but like if Michigan can at least, keep it even for a half, I think Michigan will be able to pull away, because I think Michigan is going to be able to shut them down on offense. And I think if they kind of get the same feeling, their team, as they had last week when things just weren't going right against Montana, I think then you might see the kind of give up set in the second half. So I think it's going to be like a tough quarter, maybe like the first quarter we would have expected. And then hopefully you get kind of like the Michigan versus Oregon effect in 2007, where maybe they, starts to set in, okay, we're not the team we thought we were this year.
Yeah, and Michigan has to come out and punch them right in the mouth.
Yep.
They're down right now. They got to kick them while they're down. So it'll be a really interesting game. We talked about Washington's offense there a little bit, or lack thereof, in terms of their offense, just how bad it looked last week against Montana. Conton, let's start with you on the matchup with Washington's offense against Michigan's defense.
In our kind of Michigan season preview, I called Washington a beatable Wisconsin. And part of that was, or a more beatable Wisconsin, at least, no disrespect intended. But part of that is because of how they're built on the offensive line. They really do have a massive offensive line. I think they average like 320 pounds up front. So they
didn't look massive against Montana.
No. So I'm wondering if that happens again. Is that just who they are, or does Michigan, get like the offensive line we thought Washington was going to be? So, they're a team that does want to run the ball. They've got, they think they have 4 good running backs, and they've got good players up front. And Michigan's, interior defensive line is still somewhat of a question. Western Michigan's offensive line is probably, one of, if not the best in the MAC. But it's going to be probably a next level test for that interior defensive line. Now, if Michigan, if that wasn't a fluke against Montana, and Michigan can come out and dominate that side, the trenches like Montana did in that game, then I think it's going to be a lopsided game. I think Michigan will cruise.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me? If they can't get the run game going, Washington's screwed.
Yeah, because I mean, basically, you if you guys caught like on TV that the Washington Montana game, at the end of Washington couldn't run the ball, and then when they would get into passing situations, Montana would only rush 3 or 4. And either it was a quick throw from Morris that was inaccurate, or Montana would get home with 3 or 4 rush, and they'd get a coverage sack. So I think this is, we'll find out whether that offensive line performance from Washington last week was a fluke, or if this is truly a disappointing offensive line for them, because they've got the bodies, and some of these kids were really highly rated recruits.
Yeah, that left tackle Jackson Kirkland. He's like one of the top offensive linemen in the draft for 2022 so far.
And he graded out decently, not Aiden Hutchinson against Western level to PFF, but he got decent grades. And then I want to say, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but like Kern or Kearney was the offensive lineman that graded out decently against Victor Kern or Kearney. But other than that, the offensive line grades were abysmal, and Washington was getting a lot of push with an undersized defensive line. So hopefully this is, I mean, trenches are, it's easy to pick the trenches as the main matchup to watch.
Yeah. But I wasn't too fond of their interior O-line, but I knew both their tackles were really good tackles coming into the season. So it doesn't surprise me that they graded out pretty decently. It makes you kind of think that they're going to attack the edges more. But Michigan looks so good on the edges outside of Ojabo and Harrell. I think Dax Hill and some of the linebackers helped cover up some of those mistakes that they were making in terms of setting the edge against Western Michigan. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Matt, what about Washington's passing attack against Michigan's DBs? Think there's going to be anything there, or is it going to be non-existent like last week?
Yeah, I think it's all going to be about limiting the big play. They had a receiver go down. I'm not sure if he played Jalen Polk. He was the transfer.
Was that the guy that's out for the season?
Yeah, he's out for the year.
I'm pretty sure he played, and then at halftime or something, or in the second half, he had to go get emergency surgery on his chest.
Yeah, so I think it's all going to be about limiting the big play. When I saw the upset and the score and stuff, and I, go back, you look at a low-scoring game, like, okay, did they just run the ball and weren't very effective? Tried to play a conservative game plan. Dylan Morris threw the ball 46 times. 46 times for 226 yards. I mean,
that was the most surprising stat of all when I went to go box score.
Yeah.
Checking. I literally thought he might have thrown like 18 passes.
That was exactly the number I thought.
I was like, maybe Montana just dominated the time of possession.
Yeah. He threw the ball 46 times.
Yeah.
And I mean, 46 times, 226 and 3 interceptions. A game like that, they might have a change. I don't care if it's just one game. A game like that against the FCS. Yeah. I mean, they list what I'm looking at lists Patrick O'Brien as the backup, but Sam Heward is kind of the next guy, the chosen one, the Heritage family. I don't think anything's off the table for what they could do offensively. Cade Otton is the stud tight end. Will we be able to match Dax up with him? I'm not so sure.
I wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't either. I don't think they will. So that could create some problems with either linebackers or some of the other safeties in coverage on him. So that's what I'll be watching. Keep Otten in check and limit the big plays in general and keep everything in front. And it should be a winnable matchup for Michigan, I think.
Who would you put on Otten if it's not going to be Dax?
I think Hawkins is the most logical.
Yeah,
because you can't really put Ross or Nakai Hill-Green on him.
You can't put Moulton on him.
No. I mean, Moten's athletic enough, but there's just a lot more experience. Yeah.
In terms of just pure route running.
I would try to keep Hutch lined up to Otten's side whenever Otten's in line and get a jam on him with Hutch at the line and then have Hawkins in coverage.
I do think that's a great point, and that is like a kind of a little bit of a benefit. You know, Otten and Jake Ferguson for Wisconsin are in line a little bit more than your typical receiving threat tight end.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you see in college, you know, even look at with Michigan, like Eric Hall, you know, he's either detached like as an H-back or he's out in the slot. So when the guy is more of an inline guy, I do think it's a good strategy and easier to slow down by beating him up on the line of scrimmage. So I think that's a great point.
You see that more with run first teams. They kind of, because it's so prevalent in the run game, and then you get them in the play action game. They have to be inline tight ends. So
and Otten is a great run blocking tight end. Like they need to use him in that way to get their run game going.
Exactly.
So you're going to have the opportunity to jam him when they try to run whatever play action or just regular passing plays. He's going to be in line more, as Matt said. He's going to be in line more than other tight ends.
Definitely.
Me personally, I'm going to be looking at the edge position against the Washington run game. And what I mean by that is I'm not worried about what Hutchinson's going to be doing in the run game and setting the edge. You know what he's going to do. But Ojabo and Harrell, there were some concerning things that I saw in the rewatch in terms of them just shooting the wrong gap and they're just not setting the edge. And it allowed like some of the Western Michigan running backs to get to the outside a little bit. That's one thing that I'll be looking at.
Yeah, I don't want to, give Washington any pointers or do Donovan's job for him. Certainly, if Washington's not going to pay me, but
I'm sure he's listening to this podcast.
He might want to. He might want to start exhausting his resources to improve that offense. But if I were Washington, I would probably in the run game try to attack Ojabo. Make him, because he's a more slender build than Hutch at the edge, and you're going to have a pretty big dude coming his direction. So I would go at him until he proves he can hold up.
I will say I really do like the second half of the defense and how they play in the run game.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that matchup will work out.
Yeah.
Matt, what do you think about the O-line play against that D-line of Montana's last week? And I'm talking about Washington's O-line.
Yeah, without seeing much more than highlights, it's a little difficult to kind of predict or say. I did not think it looked very good, and the numbers would suggest that. I mean, they're under 5 yards. They're under 3 yards per attempt running the ball. Like, no matter how you slice that, that's a terrible game.
Yeah, that is.
All of their offensive numbers are so bad. Like, you can't even just say, like, oh, well, if this would – their numbers – and I get it, I'm box score watching a little bit, but their numbers are so terrible offensively that, like, I almost can't believe it. And I'm worried that I'm now, like, overlooking them, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. But it's just like that was such a terrible performance. I don't know.
It was horrendous. Yeah, I mean, I watched a good bit of the second half just because I saw the score and I was like, oh God, is it going to be another upset or near upset college football this week? And their offense was just, they couldn't move the ball against Montana's defense. I couldn't comprehend what the hell was happening. Like, I realized how good Washington was supposed to be. And then Montana's a, FCS school. I thought they were Division II at the time, but they're an FCS school. I couldn't comprehend it. I thought it was going to be one of those games where, Washington struggled the first half, and in the second half, they just take over and win the game like 30-7, like USC did against San Jose State.
Yeah, I so I just looked it up, and this needs context, like we were just saying, can't be a box score tourist, but Dylan Morris ended the game 1 for 9 for
Yeah.
125-yard conversion to K Dotton, and then other than that, 0 for 8 with the game sealing interception. And some of those were drops, but some of those were just inaccurate balls. Some were dropped because they were poorly placed. The previous 2 interceptions were kind of like throwing behind a crossing receiver
Yep.
In a crowded area. So, I mean, and I don't know how much of the inaccuracy was due to not having a good pocket. Wide receivers are not the strength of Washington's offense, especially with the injuries they have right now. But yeah, it's hard to have seen any of that Montana game and come out and predict Washington having offensive success this week.
I expect all the tricks in the bag.
Yeah.
Not necessarily gimmick plays, but
I mean, they have to empty them.
Yeah.
They have to empty the bag.
Jobs are on the line already.
Right. You start 0-2 with one of them being an FCS loss. I mean, your season is over. So I expect all sorts of, probably some big plays. Like Michigan will give up some of them, but just all sorts of motions and counters and big play action shots. I mean, he's got to empty the bag.
I do like what you said, Matt, about preventing the big play. If you think, and by you I mean Michigan, if Michigan thinks that if Michigan thinks that Washington's offense is just as bad as we saw against Montana, how I would play it to, try to make them sustain drives, make them go on 10, 12 play drives to score points.
Absolutely.
And eventually they're going to break down. I mean, that'd be the hope. Yep.
They're bound to screw it up.
Yep.
If week 1 was any indication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to get to real quick on Michigan's defense one last time. Contown, talk about that Washington offense and their wide receivers against those Michigan DBs. They're going to be missing like 2 or 3 guys to injury. You just talked about Jalen Polk, but I think Jalen McMillan's out for another couple of weeks, and they had another guy go down too, and he's going to be out this week most likely.
Yeah, so if you count Polk, they were down 4 scholarship receivers against Montana. Jalen Polk, Terrell Bynum, Rome Odunze, and then Jalen McMillan. I think they expect Terrell Bynum to be back.
Okay.
I think he was the one that was actually in pads, but not playing. And then McMillan and Odunze were in street clothes. And then obviously Polk started the game, but ended up needing, had the injury. So it sounds like they'll get Bynum back, and he's the oldest, the most experienced of the group. I think he's a decent receiver. Obviously, we know they're going to run Giles Jackson out there, but Giles Jackson had some key drops. One very key drop on 4th down, where there was actually a good ball from Morris on a slant to extend the game. And our defensive backs are very familiar with Giles Jackson, and I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of a little pettiness there. They're going to want to shut him down.
I don't want to rag on the kid, but the fact that he went from a Gaddis Harbaugh offense to a John Donovan offense is so funny to me.
It's funny because I think the first destination that he was rumored to be headed to when we knew he was going to be a transfer was UCLA. So I'm sure he wishes he was in Westwood right now. But I think that this is kind of a average receiver group, technically sound, but I don't think they're elite athletes. They're certainly not the Ohio State receiver room. They're not the Penn State wide receiver room.
Not even close.
I honestly think Jalen Hall, I'm sorry if I'm screwing the name up, but the Western receiver we faced last week, I think would start for Jalen Washington. Hall. Yeah.
Oh,
they don't.
Sky Moore too.
Yeah. This isn't going to be the best wide receiver core we see this year, so I think it is a game where you might be able to put an extra guy in the box and still trust your defensive backs against this this receiver group. Like Matt said, Cade Otton is the main weapon here. If they do get a healthy Bynum back, that definitely will help them. But he's kind of a more possession guy. He's not a burner. I don't think he's a huge guy. I think he's 6'1". Let me check that.
Yeah, he's a guy that you could play up on, play some press on him.
Yeah, so he's 6'1", 190. So not the most physically imposing. Like Vincent Gray is not going to be bodied by this dude. Jamon Green's not going to be. We have the guys in the defensive backfield to line up and play one-on-one with their receivers. And I think that'll help, stymie the run game until maybe we can build a lead. And then, hopefully it'll snowball a bit for their offense.
The more you talk about it, do you think there's potential that they do play Dax over Cade Otton?
I could see it, especially I could see like bracketing him. Maybe
that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe you bracket play Nakai Hill on him in the in the underneath zone, and then Dax over top. But
yeah,
I mean, certainly when he's detached, I think that would definitely be the matchup. But I mean,
yeah,
can you play him over? I mean, I guess if he's not detached, we're probably going to be in base, so he could play on Otton's side the whole game.
Yeah, because Washington runs a lot of 2 wide receiver personnel rather than 3, just because they kind of stack the box when it comes to running the football. So it might be best for Dax to kind of stay in the box, so to speak, rather than matching up with like a slot receiver.
Yeah, that's a good point on the personnel grouping. Their personnel will likely force Michigan to play a little bit more of their true 3-4 than they did last week. So in that case, then Dax could be matching up with him pretty frequently.
What personnel would that be? Two receiver, two tight end. What is that, like 12 personnel?
2 receiver, 12. 20, 21 is 2 backs and 1 tight end.
That's right.
If I remember correctly, when we played Notre Dame in 2019 and whipped them in Ann Arbor, I want to say Hawkins played on Cole Kmet a lot. And so that might be the matchup that Michigan likes against Cade Otton, just because Hawkins is a little bit of a thicker guy than Dax. And, Kmet is like a 260 dude, and Cade Otton
he did a good job. He did a good job on Kmet against Notre Dame. What was it, 2019 that they played? And they won?
Yeah, he had the one pick that was like a ridiculous pass interference call.
And then that led to that touchdown, and it was Michael Kmet that he caught the pass in the corner. That still makes me mad whenever I see the highlights when they called that pass interference on who'd they call it on? Khalil Hudson?
I think they called it on Hudson, and then Hawkins he came over
and got the pick.
We were in cover 2 there, so I don't think Hawkins was on man, but they called the PI on Hudson, on Khalil.
God, that still pisses me off.
And Kmet, it was like, if you called it on anyone, it would have been on Kmet. He pushed off. Like I have no idea. I have no idea what pass interference is so inconsistent in college football. But.
Yeah. So on to this next segment. I kind of want to do something a little fun, kind of play a little over under on some of the things for Michigan versus Washington on Saturday. So the first over under I wanted to do was 225 rushing yards for Michigan against Washington. You go over or under on that?
I was hoping you would. I'm going to say under. I just don't think they're going to – I think it's going to be an ugly game.
You think so?
Yeah.
Dude, if it's an ugly game, I would be kind of upset.
I just think their defense is good and they're well coached on defense. Like,
that's true.
I could very easily see like 21-10. Like,
God,
yeah,
that sounds terrible.
and I think they're going to try in terms of attempts to get, up over that 200 mark.
That reminds me of at Michigan State. Was it 2018 when they won 21-7. It was just an ugly game until Shea hit
Donovan.
DPJ on that just vertical route on the sideline. If it's another one of those games, it's terrible. Over under 250 rushing yards. Because they get how much did they get against Western? Like 400 or something.
It was well over 3.
It's like 338 or something.
338.
But if the number is 250, oh, definitely under.
I'm going under on that.
Yeah, I thought you said 225 initially. 225 brings it into question. Yeah, 250 definitely under.
I could see it creep towards 200, but I like even 225. I think I would stay under. Just like Matt said, this is still a good defense. Montana was pretty much only running the ball by the end of the game. And they finished with 127 yards at 3.7 yards per carry, which is respectable for Montana. Like if Michigan runs for over 4 yards a carry, I'll be pretty happy. And I do think they'll pull away eventually, Michigan. So I could see it get close to 200. Maybe you hit a big one that gets you to like around 225, like a like a Henning run that we saw.
I think it's just clear. Like they're just gonna, trying to force the run over anything. So I put that 250 number up there just because he got so much against Western Michigan last
If Washington is insistent upon staying in their nickel look, their 2-4-5, I could see Michigan having a lot of success towards the end of the game on the ground. Yeah. I mean, like they're going to run big D tackles out there, but a 6-man box is pretty light. And I know they'll bring, Bookie Radley Hiles in. But Michigan eventually, especially if we can sustain a lead, should be able to do damage on a 6-man box.
If they go over 250, it's a blowout.
It is a blowout.
I mean, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope for over 250. How about that?
that would be huge. If they go over 250 rushing, I think we're going to be very happy.
That can be like that 2018 Wisconsin game where, we keep making the Wisconsin comparison, at least I do. But we ended up running for 300 yards against that Wisconsin team.
Big shout out to Dylan McCaffrey.
Yeah.
On his touchdown run.
Shay's like the longest non-touchdown run in college football history from Shay.
That's right. It was like 66 yards or something.
I think it was a
80. Read option.
I think it was 82. Yeah.
He ran out of gas at the end.
Yeah, an 80-yard non-touchdown run.
Yeah, that was wild. Those are some good times when they played Wisconsin and Notre Dame, Penn State, and they were just blowing them out on the revenge tour.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was a fun 10 weeks.
It was until Ohio State ripped our hearts out. But anyway,
you could have just kept it at 10 weeks.
Yeah. Next over under passing yards. I'm gonna go with 200 passing yards. Will they go over or under?
I'll go over on that one. I do think, I know Washington's got a good secondary, and we talked about that, but I think it'll be a pretty balanced attack from Michigan. I think they're gonna have a few like RPOs and PAs off what we showed last week and what we've got, waiting in the playbook still. So I'll go over. I'll say we hit at least one like 30+ yard pass play, and I think we'll get over that somewhat easily. I think maybe like 250 is what I expect.
Matt?
Yep, over 250 passing, 200 rushing is the goal.
Yeah.
Against a defense like this, if you go over 400 and well over it, like at a 450 mark, you probably won the game.
Yeah. You give me 400 yards from Michigan right now, I would pick Michigan pretty confidently.
Yep, I think it's going to be over 200. I think they're going to force Michigan to throw the ball. That's what I would do. I don't know why you wouldn't load the box and force them to do what they, what their self-proclaimed identity, force them to go against that. And what they did week 1 too. I mean, I'd try to stop the run at all costs if I was Washington. So I think over 200. I think Cade's going to have a good game.
All right. So our final segment of this episode we got to do our score predictions. I'll go first with my score prediction. I'm going to go with 34-17. Michigan gets the win over Washington. What say you?
Let's go 28-10. Michigan.
28-10. Okay. Contown.
I almost said the same exact thing as you, Ronnie. I had 31-21 in my head preseason, and I think I'll adjust that down a little bit from what we saw in that Montana game. So I'll say 31-17. I think, probably Michigan puts it away with a late touchdown. Something like Michigan's up 24-10, fourth quarter. Michigan kind of ends it goes up 31-10, and you get like a last drive that doesn't really matter from Washington. They score, and it's a little too late. So I'll say 31-17.
Well, at least we all have Michigan winning this week. Be a huge disappointment if they didn't. So
I can't find the stat right now, but home unders under Jim Harbaugh are like, it's a huge hit ratio, like well over 60%.
The under hits?
The under hits when Michigan plays at home. And now I'm going to sound like an idiot. But yeah, I'm expecting under on Saturday night. It's going to be a defensive struggle, and I think Michigan comes out on top.
Has Michigan lost a night game? I'm violating a classic.
Michigan State.
Okay. Yeah.
The monsoon.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm violating one of the main rules of for lawyers to not ask a question that you don't already know the answer to, and that's why. And that's why. That's how you get to talking about John O'Korn against Michigan State.
Yeah. What? Why are so many of our losses so heartbreaking and don't remind me? I'm not gonna go over the losses, but even 2018, the opener against Notre Dame still gets at me.
Yeah.
Michigan had their chance. And
the 2017 Michigan State game notwithstanding, Michigan plays really well at night at home.
Yeah.
But for being on our third string quarterback and having it be played in a monsoon, Michigan shows up when the lights are on at Michigan Stadium. So I do think you're going to get a crisp game, a game that Michigan is fired up for. So
they did get beat down by Wisconsin at home at night last year too.
Last year didn't happen.
I agree.
Yeah, that doesn't count. Last year doesn't count.
When fans are in the stands and the lights are on. Let's say that.
There you go. Well, that does it for this episode of the Hail to Michigan podcast. Be sure to check out our preview episode of Washington on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to rate us, review us, like us, subscribe to us, download us, do whatever. With that, this is Ronnie Harder. Have a good night, everybody. Go Blue.